check this out. The new Frozen Season 2 Sorceress. Watch this. You see all these elites right here? One button right. Boom. Look at that. The chain reaction's going. Alright, Sigil 100, Ice Shards. Let's go. We're on Inferno. Oh, I hate that. That is a terrible affix. But you see, we just melted that elite pack right there. But Suppressor and this build, it's not fun. Well, actually, any ranged build with their Suppressor, it's just going to be a bad time, right? But, you know, Cold Sword on Sigil 100, it's relatively easy. Alright guys, let's hop into the Frozen Sorceress, or the Ice Sorceress. This is going to be one of the best builds this season. And the reason why it's one of the best builds for specifically cold is because we've kind of gotten around all of the bonus damage that we would get from like targets that are stunned, immobilized, things with like the aspect of control. I tried to make the build as fast as possible with still having good, respectable boss clearing time. Because if you guys have played Cold Sorceress maybe in the past, unless you're playing Blizzard, until you build up that stagger bar, you just simply don't really deal good damage unless the target is frozen. And so I've kind of gotten around that by actually using one of the newer uniques called Blue Rose. So what does Blue Rose do? So Blue Rose allows you to actually have a bunch of mana cost reduction. I mean, we're talking huge amounts of mana cost reduction, which is great for the build, allowing us to spam more frequently. The more frequent spams we have more lucky hit chances of getting this ice spike to actually explode, and it does a pretty decent amount of damage, and the chance of it happening is tripled if the enemy is frozen. It has a 30% proc rate on lucky hit, but obviously if it's tripled, well, there you go, 90% chance. And so what we've done with the build is try to get as fast as possible in terms of our attack speed, which will be capped out at 100%, which we will reach, and on top of that, using two skills that actually attack very fast. Even though we have Ball Lightning in the enchant slot, Ball Lightning just hits so many dang times with scaling and attack speed, which is why it's so great this season. And Ball Lightning is still superior in terms of boss killing time. I'm going to be straight up. This build will be slower against bosses. However, in terms of clearing the trash, well, it's just superior in every way because, well, you get to just freeze one target, it pops, and I showed you guys from the intro clip, you can get these awesome chain reactions that just absolutely obliterate the screen, and it's one of the most satisfying builds this season, and it is respectable. It's not like, oh, well, this boss, you know, is so strong that, like, you can't kill it with this build in maybe, like, 20-30 seconds. It's going to be about the average boss killing time. You may need to build up that stagger bar one time, but for the most part, it is still very fast because Blue Rose gives you pretty much infinite mana without using Tibalt, because normally you'd have to swap out Ice Heart Breos for Tibalt, and you can swap it out on the bosses. We'll talk about the boss swap in a moment here, because there's a lot of things with this build where you may want to swap for the boss if you're doing, let's say, Uber Duriel runs. Well, there's not going to be a bunch of enemies that die where Duriel is, so you're not going to get that benefit, so you can swap things in and out, or if you want to swap out, let's say, Frostburn. But there are a few uniques that really help out this build, and you can actually farm them quite easy. And those uniques that you can farm really easy, they're from the Beast Nice. That's where Frostburn drops. So what Frostburn does is makes it so you have a chance to actually instantly freeze that target. When the target is frozen, you get free ice spikes that just shoot out from one of your main skills, which is Ice Shard. So you just get a bunch of Ice Shards shooting out, and then Blue Rose starts proccing, and it becomes really great. So Frostburn is really good, and Ice Heart Breos is basically just to clear up the trash, and it makes the build so much faster, which is essentially where this build actually can overtake Ball Lightning, because if you guys have played Ball Lightning, well, you have to activate multiple, and then you have to run up to them in point-blank range. So this is where, you know, I want to start off the video in terms of a discussion of, like, you know, why would you play this build over Ball Lightning or Fireball? Well, it has faster clear time in terms of boss versus Fireball. It's still slower against bosses compared to Ball Lightning, but in terms of clearing out the trash, anything from Sigil 80 and under, this build absolutely just shreds content, and it's a lot more fun personally to play. That's subjective, but objectively, it clears out trash faster than Ball Lightning, and you could be at a range, and if things are frozen, well, your survivability just goes up through the roof. So that's where I would say the playstyle and the differences are between this and some of the other meta builds. So it's definitely still viable. So now that we got that out of the way, because I want to start off the video with that, let's go over how the build plays. So we're actually going to be running two different enchants here. We're going to be running Ice Shards and Ball Lightning. Ball Lightning is still good for damage. It doesn't do like 0 damage, but it's just there to activate because it procs so many times, giving us more Blue Roses, and Blue Roses actually hits for a good amount of damage. So it has this chance to proc, and it's tripled but since we're attacking so many times with the ice shards being basically a rapid fire machine gun, which is why I used the thumbnail that I did, and it's just so fast with the amount of times that you're attacking per second. Heck, you could legitimately throw on one of the poison ones if you want to. There is a poison vampiric power called Infection, and because it procs every 8 times, with the addition of non-physical damage, you can get 300 plus poison damage, and you can actually run Infection on this build if you want more damage. I'm running Sanguine Brace in the gameplay. For some of the Sigil 100s, you may want to go a little bit more tanky, and you can run Undying, Sanguine. Those are all great options. But if you want to get more damage out, you can also run Domination. These are all great choices. Domination, obviously, you're going to have to build up that stagger bar, and I try not to get too many things that give you huge damages to things that are frozen. Control is just like way too good to skip out on, but usually you would run the aspect of Control because you get a lot more damage. That thing has actually gotten nerfed, but nonetheless, that is something that you could consider because it shoots so dang fast. So in terms of our skills, Ice Shard is our main source of damage. You can cast Blizzard on an elite pack. We're just really using that to have higher potential chances of freezing because we get to throw the Blizzard just one time, and then I'm just spamming the Ice Shards. Again, just pretty much for elites, you kind of want to activate Blizzard just one time. It just happens to give you extra chances to start freezing things, and once one thing's frozen and you start shooting out all the ice shards, it gets really insane, and this is where the build becomes very fun. Now, on top of that, for our other skills, we're running 2 of the shields, so that's going to be the Flame and Frost shields. It's pretty much in like every single build, and then we're running Frost Nova. You activate this when there's Elite Pack, and that can just freeze everything, or whenever it's up, if there's decent density, it just pops everything. It's one of the best. But you can see the fight up against a Butcher over here, which again, sometimes when things aren't frozen, they may take a couple seconds to kill. It's not going to just insta one-shot them like the Ball Lightning would, but that's the trade-off. You have really good clear speed, and you have slower boss killing speed. And then Teleport is for our last skill. Now, in terms of the skill tree, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of go over it relatively fast. If you have Shaco, it kind of helps out because it does give you a bunch more to other skills where you don't need to put the extra 1 point into Frozen Orb. And I'll kind of explain the choices as we swap to the boss build, because if you want to, you can just keep the same build. Your boss killing time may be a little bit slower if you're lazy, but if you really want to do like Uber Durials and you got a bunch of different runs, you should put 1 point into Frozen Orb, as that's just going to activate the Frozen Orb for your enchant, because some of the things for this build will do nothing against bosses. This is very normal for certain builds. Your enchants literally do nothing against a boss, or certain builds just, there's certain things where you just don't activate on bosses because it needs to kill or needs to activate, right, on some sort of a condition. But pretty much you want to max out Ice Shards, and then just 1 point into Frozen Orbs all you need. If you want to get this other one with Enhance, that's fine. Then we just put 1 point wonders into like all of the Flame Shield and Ice Armor. Then we got the Frost Nova. Just getting Enhanced Frost Nova is good, gives us extra cooldown reduction on it, and then Teleport with the damage reduction is great as well. And then just more damage reduction, getting some extra lucky hit chances. And then getting Snap Freeze is excellent. This is almost like another copy of Frostburn. So you have a lucky hit, and since you're attacking so many dang times, things get frozen quite fast. And with Snap Freeze, it allows you to instantly freeze the target. This is what makes it super good. And then just 1 point into Blizzard again. If you have Shaco or anything that rolls plus Blizzard, that's fine. You don't really need Blizzard for the damage. You're just using it for that chill effect, specifically again on the bosses. So you chill the boss, and that will build up the stagger bar a little bit faster. And again, I try not to make the build all about it, so you can still see by the time the bar goes up, it's just like one time. Previously, some bosses you'd have to build it up multiple times in like Season 0 and Season 1. And then we're running Ball Lightning with the Enhanced Ball Lightning. This is going to get increased attack speed, so we get more copies of the brand new Blue Rose. And then we're maxing out pretty much everything in here except for the Permafrost. You can max this out if you want to. I do like to get the other ones because it's just up more of the time, if that makes sense. This one, Hoarfrost, if you want to, you can swap out points in that, put it into Permafrost, or if you want to swap points out of Potent Warding, this is kind of up to you. It's just that for my particular build, I maxed out. But yeah, you could definitely max out all of these, that's totally fine, or you can get more defenses. It's kind of flexible over here. But this is what makes it different. Before, most people would go with, let's say, Avalanche. That was kind of the more popular option for most people. Shatter is just way too slow. Avalanche is just really good because it would give you extra mana cost reduction and you get more damage. But why get a chance to get another like free one where it doesn't really cost anything and it does X40 when you could just get 50% more damage, because 50% more attack speed, and that is tied into all of the proc rates of the Blue Rose. It's just way better. Azu's Ferocity is probably going to get nerfed eventually, because I've been playing it in literally every single build. It doesn't matter if it's cold, fire, lightning. This thing is just out of control with the amount of stats that it gives you. There is very few things that will give you 50% additional attack speed in the game, which is just so incredibly powerful. And then on top of that, has bonuses with fire, but we don't even use fire. But yeah, Azu's Ferocity, as you guys have seen in most of my builds, it's just crazy good. Now, as far as the equipment goes, we're running Ever-Living Aspect, and you'll see the gear stat priorities, just getting max life, cooldown reduction, disobedience, kind of like the bread and butter of every single build. Getting max life, damage reduction, getting frost burns is great. Now, on the bosses, you may want to swap, and I'll get into that in a second. Ice Heart is really good. Azu's, I mean, it's 30% extra crit strike chance, and then we got Aspect of Ancient Flame. This is what lets Azu's attack 50% faster in terms of her attack speed than Emerald, Ruby, Diamond. And then for the Vampiric powers, you want Ravenous, so we get extra attack speed. Metamorphosis is optional. I do like to have extra mobility and being unstoppable the whole time. It's always kind of a nice thing to have. And then Prey on the Weak, a Cursed Touch, those kind of bread and butter. And then the last one's kind of up to you. You can get a lot more damage if you want to run the Poison one. You can run Poison, you can run Sanguine, you can run Undying, all up to you on this last slot. Technically, Metamorphosis is optional too. Just Ravenous, Prey in the Weak, a Cursed Touch is literally in every single meta build for the most part, because you want to be able to apply vulnerability, which is kind of what the Sorceress lacked in Season 0 and Season 1, and now with a Cursed Touch, I mean, you just get so many attacks. It's a lucky hit chance to activate, and it's a rapid-fire machine gun build. That's why the thumbnail has the gun in it, because people were asking, dude, how are you shooting so fast? How are you activating all these Blue Roses? Which, if you watch in the gameplay, there's a little spike that kind of comes out of the ground, and sometimes it just goes up like crazy. I don't believe there's an internal cooldown on this, so it's awesome for those reasons. And you'll see that this build is just superior for Hell Tides compared to like Ball Lightning. Fireball is really good for Hell Tides as well, and ideally you don't want to just slam out Nightmare Dungeon 100, Sigil 100, but I'll give you guys gameplay of it. This build is more than capable of doing every single piece of content in the game, but again, most of the time that you're playing the game, you're not just doing Sigil 100s, so that's why I like this build over the Ball Lightning build. Even though Ball Lightning was fantastic for doing like Uber runs, it does it relatively fast in the game. But if you are in the boss, this is one thing that I can actually recommend for you to swap into. Let's finish off this first. So for the rest of the equipment here. So in terms of the weapon, we were just going over Ancient Flame, and then I went over the Vampiric powers. And then for the right side here, we've got the Elementalist Aspect. So this gives us a huge amount of bonus at 60% crit strike chance. So this right here and Azu's will give us 90% crit strike chance for our core or our mastery skills. So basically the Ball Lightning as well as the Ice Shards, and that's how we get easy 100% crit. And then Aspect of Piercing Cold. This is really great. Your Ice Shards will pierce and they will bounce to other targets. It's super good. For one of these over here, where the greater Ice Shards, we have a barrier. Ice Shards always receive its bonus against frozen enemies. So that bonus is where it's going to be ricocheting. So this is how we basically have insane clear speed. And then we also, on the ring, ideally, if you can get any resource generation, that does help out a little bit. And then with Blue Rose, well, it just kind of rolls the same. For the most part, the thing that you actually kind of want to try to prioritize is getting that mana cost reduction on Blue Rose. That's how I have infinite mana with this build. And then another thing is the offhand. This is actually pretty important. So it gives you, there's increased damage while you have barrier, but also here, let me actually bump this up here. So there's a lot of different things that you can roll here. If your mana cost is good, so I already have mana cost reduction here. This is another thing that's actually really good, and it actually is already on Frostburn. You may not need to get cooldown reduction on this. Usually you do want cooldown reduction just so you can activate your skills more often with some builds. Some builds you do want to activate, let's say, an ultimate. But the one thing that I really like here is this one. I feel like this is probably the #1 stat to look out for, which is Lucky Hit, to chance to restore primary resource. You already have it on your gloves, but if you don't have Frostburns, well, then try to get it on a roll. But Frostburn's already default comes with that, so it's great. But specifically getting it on your offhand is good. And as far as weapons, is Dagger better or is Wand better? I like the Wand much better because it's Lucky Hit chance. The Dagger will give you implicit of damage to close enemies. So wand is superior for the weapon. But as far as the offhand goes, if your mana is good, you can drop the lucky hit, get extra cooldown reduction, just so you can spam a lot of your skills much faster. But specifically, that lucky hit chance, I would say, is absolute priority if your energy is not able to be maintained. Now, I have most of the stuff here for the notes in terms of the boss, but I'll also kind of show you guys. So on bosses, you're not going to be freezing the bosses instantly. That will technically build up the stagger bar if it like procs, but like Fists of Fate are excellent. You already have maximum attack speed, you already have maximum crit. So having Fists of Fate is going to be really good just because you get an insane amount of extra damage. It also technically helps build up stagger, but that extra damage that you get is really hard to beat. You know, how it kind of works is basically 100% extra additional damage. Not like X multiplicative, but it's just percent. So it's still good. It still beats out pretty much everything in the game for the most part. You can also look out if you want to run like +4 to ice shards. That's also another options in your gloves. You can also get a chance to restore the resource, which automatically roll on Fist of Fate. That can be another option as well. But Fist of Fate, if you can get a high roll. If it's not a high roll, then don't bother. If it's not like at least a 280, then you don't need to swap into it. Again, if you happen to have another thing to swap into, that's totally fine. But as far as our ring, so when we're on the bosses, and I'm actually going to fast forward to like a Sigil 100, on the bosses, you can swap some things because some abilities and passives, it's just in Diablo, they just don't work against bosses. So what doesn't work? Well, Ice Shards doesn't work against the boss until he's frozen. So you can swap something out. If you want to run Blizzard, you want to run Frozen Orb. I personally prefer Frozen Orb over everything because it just activates more procs. It just shoots multiple times on your lucky hit. And since we're attacking super fast, it's like a rapid fire machine gun build. That's what I opt to go for. You can also swap one of your rings if you want to. You can see you don't need the Ice Shards piercing because there's literally only one monster. Sometimes I know some bosses spawn in other things, but you can swap that out completely. You can get extra damage with Barrier, and you can see the respectable boss killing time. Like I said, it's not going to be as fast as Ball Lightning, but you're way faster than Ball Lightning in the actual dungeon itself. And if you're doing Hell Tides, basically most of the content in the game, with the exception of, you know, Sigil 100s, you're going to be relatively A-okay. And you can see the boss freezes, and we can almost insta them most of the time if they are frozen. You can also swap different aspects if you want to. You can run multiple Frost Novas and build up that stagger bar, but even on a Sigil 100, it's still very, very fast. So you guys can get an idea of a Sigil 100, the gameplay. Most of the things are going to be frozen, and when things are frozen, well, your survivability just goes up through the roof. One thing that you may want to try to prioritize in terms of a stat is specifically getting armor on Sorceress. It really helps out because physical damage reduction is a little bit more tough on their Paragon board because you get a little bit more in the all resistance department versus getting armor. So getting things like the aspect of disobedience can significantly help out. I know a lot of builds will show you to play with Riment, and you can play with Riment because it stuns things, but if something's not, you know, stunned and it just hits you, you could just take an insane amount of damage because you don't have, let's say, Everliving or aspect of disobedience, or if you have a Shaco, that also helps out with damage reduction as well. Now, in terms of the other things, if you want to do some swaps, there are other options. You can run Blizzard, but I personally think Frozen Orb is one of the better choices. Again, this is just for the bosses. Now, in terms of the Paragon board, this is what we're working with once it loads in. Okay, so we're going to start off on the starter board. We're going to go ahead and get Elementalist. It's very important that you copy the Paragon board exactly as you see it, okay? And the reason why is the exact locations will give us some sort of a bonus. So this one is supposed to be for like non-physical damage, and damage reduction modifiers gives us a bonus. So this is where like you would actually get 300 to fire, lightning, and cold damage. So this is how you can actually get pretty good damage with Ball Lightning. Even though this is not a Ball Lightning build, it still does decent damage. It's not like something you just skip out on, and it's free anyway, so it gives us extra cold damage, lightning damage, and again, if you want to run the poison vampiric power, this is where it just gets you free damage. And then over here, and the next one, we're getting Enchantment Master with Unleash. Again, it's very important because this one gives us bonus to magic nodes, and over here there is more of this non-physical damage. That's how we reach maximum cold, fire, and lightning damage with basically all the builds. It's one of the most OP things in the entire game to get. And then Elemental Summoner with Control. This is the one thing that I do run that is related to building up that stagger ball or on a frozen enemy. A lot of builds you'll see that they rely so much on specifically getting the things to be frozen, and that's where the damage really falls off in the boss fight, whereas this build doesn't really have too many problems specifically with some of the bosses or elites if they're not frozen, and that just helps out a lot. And then we've got after we go for Elemental Summoner, we go up to Frigid Fate. We definitely want to get this node over here. And then we've got Enchanter over here, so more non-physical damage. And then we are going to go back down over here and go to the right, and we're going to get Ceaseless Conduit, just so we can get the Destruction, which gives us increased crit strike damage, because we have 100% crit, and that's pretty good. And then we're going to go back over to our 4th board and get our last one, which is Static Surge. So Static Surge over here is going to be socketed with Exploit, so more damage against the vulnerable targets, and it's going to technically ramp up, and you're going to ramp up basically instantly, which is excellent. And you can see most of the stuff in Sigil 100, it's just frozen most of the time. And again, the build is relatively fast from the intro clip. Yeah, Suppressor is just kind of one of those nasty ones that you have to get in melee range for. So again, Ball Lightning would be superior against that. But I'm trying to show you guys, like, in the worst conditions, how the build kind of performs. And still very, very respectable in terms of, like, clear speed. Again, I love this for Sigil 80 and under. No one's really just slamming out Sigil 100s, but I get it as a content creator. There's a lot of people out there like, oh, can this build do Sigil 100? Or this build can't do Sigil 100. It must be a bad build. And that's totally not the case. I don't want you guys to think that you have to be able to do Sigil 100, because the main focus in your endgame goal should be to essentially just farm those uber uniques. And this build, it can do it. It's a little bit slower than Ball Lightning, but again, when you're doing the Helltide, when you're just doing Nightmare Dungeons to level up your glyphs, and if you're just playing the game in general, or you're helping a friend or whatever, this build absolutely just dominates in terms of speed. And it's just super satisfying to have all these explosions happen. And you can see right now, I didn't even swap to Ball Lightning. If you don't want to play Ball Lightning in the build, by all means, just run Frozen Orb the whole time. Sometimes I end up forgetting to swap, and the build clears out so fast, I really don't notice too much of a difference. But yeah, the Blue Rose really helps out. And if you do want to run Tybalt, that is another option. I made like a min-maxer one for, like, if you do happen to have Shaco, if you get Ring of Starless Skies, you can run other things. You can even throw in Domination if you want to. There's a few different things, and if you just read the notes that I'll have, there's a couple suggestions. If you want to, instead of the Ice Heart Breos, you could throw into Bolts, and then you'd also have, like, kind of infinite mana, and then you can drop the Blue Rose if you wanted to. But I figured I wanted to try to incorporate Blue Rose in the build, as it's a brand new unique that drops from Duriel, and it's actually kind of a fun thing, and it's respectable in terms of its damage. And remember, as the bosses go, you want to do the Beast in Ice as well as Gregor to get your drops. But that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. If you guys want to see more Diablo content in the future, drop a like on it and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, and I'm out. Peace.